I'm really excited to be here. My name is Maddie Clifford, with the Debt Collective, and I'm joined today with a very important person, a very brilliant person named Julia Barnard. She is the former ombudsman at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Such a hard word to say,
I know.
ombudsman. But you're
Mhm.
a woman, so
I know. I always
anyway.
just said ombuds.
But we are so excited to have her today. She has a lot of really important things to share with us all. But to start off, I've really enjoyed meeting you and working with you, even the small amount that I've been able to. But can you let folks know just like a little bit more about yourself, especially like maybe where you're based, a little bit about your background as well would be wonderful.
Sure. Thank you for having me.
Oh,
Um, I'm Julia Barnard. I am originally from Lawrence, Kansas. Shout out to Kansas people, but now I'm living in Durham, North Carolina, which is also wonderful. And I've been working on student debt for like my entire adult career, basically. I started out as a researcher where I did a lot of interviews with people who have student debt. And then I moved into kind of policy work, specifically working on the student debt cancellation fight, like from 2016 to 2020. And then did some time in the federal government at the CFPB as a markets analyst, where I just did research on the student loan market.
mhm.
And then moved in as an advisor to the director, who was Rohit Chopra, and became the student loan ombudsman in February 2024. So
Oh,
that's,
wow.
yeah.
That's interesting. And, kind of what led you to be interested in student loan debt in particular of all the different things that are going wrong with our economy?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I actually started out just being interested in anti poverty policy more generally and was really interested in housing, specifically public housing.
Mhm.
Um, and I was working on that and learning about the policy. And honestly, like, to be super frank, just didn't feel as much of a kinship with the people in the housing space. And I felt a little bit more like it would be a lifetime fight in the housing space to get good quality public housing. I mean, I don't know if I was right about that. This is me, like over a decade ago. But at the time, it was when the student debt cancellation movement was really heating up. And my parents were both they're retired now, but they were both university professors.
Right.
Uh, grandfather got out of poverty in he was raised in rural Alabama, and thanks to the GI Bill and higher education, he became a professor. And he and my grandmother were able to leave Alabama and get out of poverty. And they always talked about how education was the way out for them. And education has added so much to my life. And I know, as just a person who, you know, I'm a millennial, so many of my friends have six-figure student debt. And as I did more and more interviews, I realized I think this is the fight for my life. I think we can win cancellation. Um, I don't think it should take our whole careers to win cancellation. I think during the Biden administration, we got 5 million people through. I'm extremely proud of that.
Right.
We were trying to cancel debt for all over 40 million people with federal student loans in default. I still think we can achieve that. So that's my career.
Yeah, no, it made me think what you're saying about the American dream.
Hmm.
And so, like, a lot of the time, I think maybe even for generations before us, boomers or even our parents, I'm a millennial as well, by the way. The owning a home was the
Right,
American dream.
right,
And education was also the American dream, but I think especially millennials were just like really told over and over and over access to education, do
right.
whatever it takes, get your education, and all of these doors will open up to you. So I really resonate with that in the sense that like a lot of different debt types are connected. And
Yeah,
a lot of the affordability crisis is interconnected. A lot of student debtors suffer from precarity in terms of their housing. But yeah, there's something unique about education and student debt that just like really resonates with millennials, especially, but all generations. I mean, older debtors exist and are a really important demographic, as well as young people. So we're all connected in this one.
yeah,
So I wanted to hear a little bit more about how you first started working at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and some of your main responsibilities. And also, before you do that, too, just give folks a little bit of a background about why the CFPB is so important and how it kind of began.
yeah. Well, the CFPB was ultimately opened basically after the Great Recession to be kind of, as we say, a cop on the beat of kind of financial fraud. So banks taking advantage of everyday people, financial products, that make it impossible. Subscription traps where you can't get out of the subscription, um, credit cards where they say you have rewards and then maybe they take them away, junk fees,
Yeah.
student loans where, a lot of people now are in doom loops, can't reach a servicer, maybe have their payment debited twice. The CFPB was meant basically to take complaints from debtors, um, kind of look at those complaints and try to intervene in policy to make sure that financial institutions could not take advantage of everyday Americans. So that's what I was doing. I started out actually working on credit cards, debt collection, um, some other products. And then, of course, my lifelong career dream is to work on student loans. So I eventually was working on student loans, worked a lot on, new forms of lending that schools are doing called institutional lending. We worked on tuition payment plans. And then eventually started to work on larger kind of strategy questions about student loans and what are we going to do about this crisis. And of course, was just helping the general push during the Biden administration to get as many people cancellation as possible.
Right. Thank you for that background information because I think, as we've talked about as millennials, the financial crisis was like such a huge part of our lives. I remember graduating in '08 and having this college degree that I'd worked my butt off to get. All of a sudden, it wasn't really worthwhile in some ways. I entered the job market during that recession period. And so it's really resonant that this particular organization started the CFPB basically to prevent another financial crisis like that from happening
Yeah,
again.
exactly.
So that's what makes it so
And,
important.
such a big conversation at that time was about like the mortgage affordability program. There was a program called HAMP that was supposed to help people avoid foreclosure. There were a lot of programs then, and Congress did so much soul searching about all of this in the wake of the recession and learned that really these programs were just too complicated. Part of the reason they didn't work is they were just simply too complicated. And that has such parallels to the student loan system today. We're just
Right.
really not useful for individual people trying to deal with their loans, even though it might seem like a good solution to maybe financial institutions or policymakers.
Right. Absolutely. So can you tell us a little bit more about when you were working at the CFPB? What were some of the biggest misconceptions that people have about the student debt crisis?
Great question.
What are things that people think that's
I mean,
just not.
one of the huge ones, especially as we think about student debt cancellation, is like who is a student debtor? I
Mhm.
think people have a perception that it's like an elite group, everybody went to college, everybody's thriving. And 40% of people who start college don't actually get a degree.
Mhm.
And so our estimation is that 40% of student debtors never actually got a degree. And so, of course, those people have these big amounts of debt. In some cases, even just $5,000 to $10,000 that go into default because they started higher education but never actually got the benefits that are supposed to come along with higher education. I think that's a huge misconception. It involves people of all political parties. It involves people of all ages. I think a lot of people think of student debtors as young people. That's not really true. The fastest growing group of student debtors is older adults, in fact. Um, yeah, I think those are probably the primary misconceptions would be age, the fact that all student debtors, have stable finances or are reaping the benefits of successful higher education. I,
Yeah. I would also add, like, I think that people have this perception that student debtors haven't tried to pay back their student loans. I think that people who don't carry this burden themselves might not know, for example, that you can spend, 10 years paying $800 a month and still end up with more than you actually borrowed. And that the very structure of student loans themselves are some of the most difficult to escape. Through bankruptcy or whether it be student loan servicers actually not providing a service at all and actually doing everything in their power to keep you in debt and make it harder for you to gain the relief that you deserve. I owe $120,000 of student debt, and in the beginning, I think I just like didn't fully process. I had the experience of being a young person taking out a huge amount of debt, and I think I just didn't process how much debt I was taking on, and also I just felt like this will help me get access to better jobs. And it was almost a catch-22 because yes, it did provide access to the best paying job that I ever had at the time, but also it pulled me deeper into this debt that has been difficult and impossible to escape, and in which a debt that has really changed my life circumstances. I didn't have kids. I didn't get married. I made all these life decisions. And I don't think people understand, 40 million people are dealing with this particular aspect of being in debt.
Yeah, I think that's another good one. Yeah, how difficult it is. I mean, when I was the ombudsman, the job in that role is to read complaints specifically and try to intervene in cases where we think we can and, refer cases to enforcement or supervision when we think that's the right pathway for an issue. But one thing that really stuck out to me with complaints was how much people were trying to go through all the channels and literally just could not reach anyone or get information. And even since I've left CFPB, as we're dealing with the fallout of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, I believe it's called, and the new repayment program that's going to raise people's payments, by double or triple or even quadruple. I think a lot of people just don't realize the serious financial burden and the kind of dystopian system where even people who really want to make payments just are unable to do so.
Right. I think the last thing I think people might not realize as well is this is a issue that's very much gendered as well and racialized. So women hold 2/3 of student debt. Can you explain like why there might be like more women with student debt or more people of color, and particularly how this might affect Black Americans very
Yeah.
acutely?
Yeah. And we know this has always been true. I think all the way, if we look back at American history, obviously all of American history, but even if you think about the GI Bill, I mean, the historically Black colleges and universities were kind of like totally, first of all, not all of the Black GIs got the benefit of the bill. And the ones who did were applying to these HBCUs because the time of segregation, and those HBCUs were kind of like overflowing. They didn't have seats for everybody. So this has been true for so long. Those institutions are still underfunded. Um, by our public system. And, we know that all of the ways in our society that systemic racism, sexism show up, for example, um, careers that are typically filled by women, let's say nurses, teachers, typically make less. The labor market and now have been so thoroughly credentialized that people need more school to reach those jobs. And then the jobs are underpaid, social workers, jobs like that. And we know that a lot of the social safety net has been pulled out from under people as well. So I think all of that just exacerbates the problems we're already facing as a society.
Right, absolutely. And it's like we want our teachers to be highly credentialed. We want our social workers to be really, really good at what they do. And so I think people often are like, "Oh, well, the cost of college is too expensive. It's too expensive." In reality, education shouldn't be a debt sentence in the first place. It's not that we don't want the education; it's that it shouldn't be a debt sentence. So
Yeah,
thank you
and
for
our
mentioning that.
society, I've always been really inspired by LBJ's approach to the war on poverty and to higher education. And when he signed the Higher Education Act, he gave a great speech where he talks about it's a promise we're making to our children that not having enough money should not prevent them from getting educated. And I think about that a lot, and we just have not lived up to that vision ever.
Right, absolutely. So can you tell us about how your role shifted once, the Biden administration, we transitioned from the Biden administration to the Trump administration? So if you could tell us like a little bit about like what you were responsible for doing and how that might have changed once the Trump office took power most recently.
Yeah, I mean, at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, like certain roles like mine, the student loan ombudsman don't actually change with the administration. So I was actually, assuming that I would continue to be doing a lot of casework. I would continue to help people with their individual student loan problems, probably the focus areas would change. But I assumed certain issues, like for example, I was working on private equity's involvement in college tuition pricing. I actually thought that, would continue and would be popular with
Mhm.
the new and some Republicans in Congress have even started investigations into this issue. So I really thought that like there would be a lot of ongoing work, but
Right.
unfortunately, we got an acting director, Russell Vogt, in February, and I, along with hundreds of my colleagues, were fired on the spot, no notice, day one. So that happened to me. Our union got involved with the help of our union's NTEU, which is the National Treasury Employees Union, and the union with Gupta Wessler filed a case in federal court that ended up getting us reinstated. So I actually went back to the CFPB 2 months later, and had a bit of time to do work. But at that time, like everyone who was involved in helping me expand the casework program was gone. And it was no longer possible. I was asked directly by the Department of Education to stop working on federal loans.
Mhm.
The conditions were such that I no longer felt that it was possible to do the job, which is why I ended up leaving.
Right. And before you ended up leaving, can you share the report that you were, tasked with producing as part of your job, and some of the things that you noticed about how the report there were changes in that report?
Yeah. So I one of the responsibilities, the position of the student loan ombuds is actually outlined in the initial, Dodd-Frank Act, Consumer Financial Protection Act that established the CFPB.
Right.
And one of the basic responsibilities of the student loan ombudsman is to write this annual report that comes out every October.
Hmm.
And so one thing I had been doing over the course of the past, ever since I started, was trying to really like lock in on making that report as good as it could be, give information to the public, really make our priorities clear to the public and also to businesses, entities that deal with consumers. Um, yeah, make the report really strong. So I did that after I got reinstated in April and submitted that report, worked it through the clearance process, submitted it, and was told by leadership that it would not be published and would need to be rewritten. Um, and at that point, I did decide to resign because I felt that there was no way for me to legally and ethically, fulfill the role that I felt so um, deeply responsible to.
Absolutely. What were some of your findings that, especially the ones that were omitted, because the Trump administration appointees later submitted a revised version of your report that was about half the number of pages. Let's talk about specifically what they took out, and why do you think that might be important for us to talk about, or keep our eyes on?
Yeah, ultimately, I think it was like almost completely rewritten. Um, but I had 3 special sections that I felt strongly about, and all of those were taken out. There was one on federal student loan default, which is an extremely, punitive system that basically forces collections from millions of borrowers every year, and it's actually been turned off since the CARES Act in 2020, and it's actually still paused, um, but we but I wrote a whole section on pathways out of default, ways for people to kind of get out of default by seeking cancellation, um, and trying to, make that process more clear because the federal government at the moment does not do a very good job walking borrowers through the pathways. So I was trying, part of the CFPB's mission is financial education, trying to make the system clearer for people. So I was trying to do that with that section, and also advocate for some policy changes that would protect people more
Mhm.
from falling under the poverty level because of their student debt. And then there was a section, like I said before, on private equity involvement in college tuition pricing. There are just a couple of private equity companies that have basically collected a bunch of data and partner with colleges to kind of predict how much students would be willing to pay to attend certain schools. And their sophisticated algorithms, in a lot of cases, I think it like mirrors what's happening in other markets. I don't know if you heard about the RealPage case, but that was a case where like private equity or the company RealPage was working with a bunch of smaller landlords to basically get the data and then say how high they could put rental prices.
Right.
Uh, yeah, I think it has some similarities to that kind of stuff. So I was working on learning about it. I wrote it up. And like I said, that's actually what I think it's Representative Jim Jordan on the House Judiciary Committee opened an investigation into. So I was surprised that part was left out. And then there was a third section on private student loans where borrowers might be eligible for total loan cancellation because their school misled them or was fraudulent in some way, but they're being denied cancellation by their private lenders. And that section was struck. So those are the big sections. I also, talked about responsiveness. A lot of entities basically s- have in a meaningful way, stopped or seriously slowed down their responses to consumer complaints. So I had some analysis on that by company that was not published. Yeah.
Yeah, and can you talk about, because I read, people can read about this whole entire situation in the American Prospect, and I'll link the article below. But one thing that really struck me was that in 2025, the CFPB received 25,000 complaints from student loan borrowers in particular. What can that tell us about the state of the student debt crisis in general? Like we talked earlier about how the CFPB was created as kind of a watchdog. Maybe can you tell us a few things that kind of show up as really alarming about that?
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, I think as the CFPB has been in the news because of, the attempted shutdown of the entire CFPB, Doge involvement, all of this, the beautiful part of all that, I guess, is that more people are finding out about the CFPB.
Right.
So in some ways, we've gotten more complaints, or the CFPB has got more complaints in 2025 than I think any year in any year prior by a wide margin. I think
Okay.
that's a beautiful thing. And so I think some of the increase is just due to more people complaining to the system. However, the number of student loan complaints has basically been going up, 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 up. Like every year is the highest year ever.
Mhm.
And I was, of course, as the ombuds, I was like kind of trying to pull trends out of that data. And I have been trying to say for years that I think the system is as bad as it has ever been. I think it's almost comically bad for many people. Most of the most prominent complaint type we were getting was people who tried to make payments and the payment was rejected for no reason. They were enrolled in auto pay. It didn't pull. Really just comically bad, basic errors in the system. So yes, I do think it is like a flashing red light on student loans right now, and we would all do well to pay attention to it. Policymakers, um, the general public, the industry. It's
Yeah.
certainly an alarming situation.
Yeah, and I think people that don't understand the student debt crisis or the student debt system, it is Kafkaesque to go
Yeah,
through. I'll give one example. As I mentioned, I owe over $120,000 in federal student debt. I was also a teacher for over 8 years, and because I'm an artist, and artists are often gig workers, it's really difficult to qualify for student loan cancellation programs such as PSLF. A lot of these programs and a lot of these structures are designed to omit people, not to accept people. And PSLF was actually one of the hardest programs to gain acceptance into until a lot of folks like yourself and others organized. And because it comes from the ground up, it doesn't come from the top down, and organized and said we need to really fix these programs and these problems. But I would argue that there's never really been a good
certainly.
student loan cancellation program in existence. So, um, yeah, that's just something I wanted to
I
name.
own it. I mean, I feel like the consumer advocate community, the legal aid community for years has been saying the best cancellation program will be opt out and automatic. And I think that's
Right.
correct. So agree with you completely. I feel like, attempts were made.
Exactly. No. And so let me see. I want to talk about what should student debtors in general right now, and also the general public, because I want to reiterate that student debt impacts all of us,
Yeah.
whether you're a student debt yourself or your family or your friends. This is weighing down the entire economy. What should people be paying attention to right now in the student debt space? We know, for example, the DOE walked back instituting wage garnishment for debtors in default. Can you talk a little bit about a few things that might be happening that people should be privy to?
Sure. Like on a policy level.
Sure, yeah. That would be great.
I mean, we were extremely excited to see the pause of forced collections for borrowers in default. Like I said,
Mhm.
we have such a comically bad situation with the system right now where people can't even make payments in when they're enrolled in auto pay. Um,
Right,
so a lot of people are falling into default by mistake. A lot of people are falling into default because they were unable to make a payment even when they tried. And of
right.
course, a lot of people simply can't make payments because they're unaffordable. So our forced collection system is so punitive, it pushes people under the federal poverty level. So I have been an advocate for a long time. Many others have as well. The Debt Collective certainly has that we should simply not do forced collections uh,
Yeah.
in the default program. And so it's great to see a temporary pause. I think one of the issues, I guess, as I reflect on my time in the space, is that a lot of, the 4-year cycle of power in Washington, D.C. and at agencies does not necessarily lend itself to like long term fixing of complicated and difficult problems like this.
Mhm.
And I think, we're seeing a lot of temporary fixes. We could just find a way to turn this stuff off permanently and fix it that way. But of course, we haven't done it. But
Mhm.
I think if we build power together and we're able to lift this up as an issue that people care about, that affects people's, basic financial stability, affects the ability to, achieve the American dream, like we've been talking about this whole conversation, I think we can push to get that made permanent. So that's going on. I was talking about the One Big Beautiful Bill Act before. That's going to unfortunately, raise the repayment rates for millions of people. That could double, triple, quadruple those rates. I think that's extremely unaffordable. Comes at a really bad time when people are already struggling to make ends meet. So I think if we take our focus off of this issue, we risk really making it truly catastrophic for millions of families. And I know it's been frustrating. It's certainly frustrating we didn't win more broad-based cancellation. I think we still can. I don't think it's time to give up. I don't think it's time to let politicians off the hook. I think it's an affordability issue. It affects everyone. It affects the entire economy. And if we have these millions of borrowers going from $0 payments over the entire, you know, prior 5-year period, coming into, $1,000 payments a month, it's going to be really catastrophic for individuals and also for the broader economy. So, yeah, I would encourage folks to kind of stay engaged with the issue, raise it with representatives, come to the Debt Collective, get organized, try to talk to representatives, talk to candidates. Um, yeah. And for borrowers, one thing I do want to say is that I don't think they should stop submitting complaints, even though the complaint system is kind of an uphill battle. Um, and would encourage them. Most senators, representatives have offices that are called constituent services offices where they offer casework to help people interact with the federal government. And so I would encourage borrowers to reach out through that channel to get help. Um,
Mhm.
and that will help. It has the dual benefit of helping individuals, but also helps educate the representatives.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and I also wanna, like, remind folks that, I think sometimes we get really caught up in, individual administrations. Obviously, right now, it's a very chaotic and very stressful time, but that we actually the Trump administration, the first iteration of the Trump administration was when the pause on student loan payments happened, and even though, it was temporary, I think it gave people a picture of what it would be like not to pay back this debt.
Yeah,
People had money to pay for groceries. People had money to pay for gas in their car to help pay their rent. And I don't think that Americans are going to forget that anytime
right.
soon. And I think that Americans really started to realize that their government has the power not only to pause student loan debt, but also to cancel student debt en masse and also to fund college. And so I think we need to continue to reiterate that and not get so focused on individual administrations because the debt collective has been around since Occupy Wall Street. We've had wins during the Obama administrations. We've had losses. We've had a lot of challenges under Biden. We've had random wins sometimes under Trump administration. So I just want to remind people that
Yeah,
hope is not lost, but we have strength in numbers. So we have to keep lifting up our voices for sure.
yeah. Well said.
Yeah, and so the last thing I wanted to ask you, and I also wanted to say once again, thank you so much for talking to me. It's always such a pleasure talking to you. I was wondering how folks can get involved. If folks don't know, Julia Barnard now works at the Debt Collective. We're so excited to have you as a higher education
Yeah.
lead. Can you let folks know how they can get tapped in with you and even be able to talk to you through our virtual meetings?
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm super happy to be with the Debt Collective. It's been a wonderful new home for me. We're working on a lot of things. I think Maddie's point that not all hope is lost just feels like the point of the year to me. We can still do this, we've got, I think, the public on our side. We've got, um, I think, momentum on our side. I think there's a lot we can still do. So we're focusing on a few different things. Our main campaigns are one about cancellation, so helping people apply for the types of cancellation that exist. That includes, public service loan forgiveness, like you raised, but also total permanent disability discharge. There's borrower defense to repayment for people who attended schools that misled them. There are a lot of different types of cancellation. We're trying to help people kind of learn about those options and apply. Um, and we're also, yeah, so we're doing cancellation, we're doing default. We're trying to help people who have loans in default status make a decision about getting their loan out of default status, try to figure out how. A lot of times that's also through cancellation avenues. And then finally, we're working on the right to learn. We're trying to zoom out a little and say, even if we forgive all student loans, we cancel all student loans tomorrow, we still obviously have the problem of the future. And
Right.
also, kind of, we need to return to this vision. Like shouted out LBJ earlier, the promise that children in this country should not hit a learning wall uh, because of the income that their family has. So, or the income or the wealth. So I think we need to return to that promise, kind of establish and fight for our right to learn. That could include something like college for all. That could, free college. It could include other things like more funding for public schools at the K-12 level. It includes a lot. Um, but under the umbrella of right to learn. So we are organizing a lot of people all over the country. Please come to our meetings. Our meetings are getting so many amazing people attending. We have hundreds of people at a lot of these meetings. They're very moving. So yeah, I would encourage people to come to our meetings. If you want to get involved in any way, we need people to tell their own stories of student debts. Even if they're just confused, I think that's a really good story to tell, just how difficult it is to navigate this system. We need people to tell stories about free college, free um, K-12. We need people willing to talk to the press, people willing to talk to their representatives. We're doing town hall trainings to help people get confident attending town halls and asking questions about student debt or their right to learn. Um, and ultimately, we want to build a future where we can provide free, quality higher education to people who want it in this country. Um, so yeah, please join us. I'm really loving it here. It's a really special place for organizing. I think I have been a part of the advocacy community for a long time, but the Debt Collective has such a special community of debtors that I think is not replicated anywhere else. So, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was thinking too about this promise of education. And I've see sometimes like there'll be viral clips of, we have this illiteracy crisis and we have people are having a difficult time critically thinking. And I think this devaluing and underfunding
Yeah.
education has made us really susceptible to authoritarianism because people are afraid to ask questions, they're afraid to be curious. And people often talk about go into the trades instead of going into education. Education is a scam, college is a scam. And people are really not understanding that they need to just break down the entire framework. Everyone should be able to pursue a field of study. Yes, it's wonderful if you want to become an electrician, for one, that takes education too.
And
And
that
for
often,
two, which people
the
often
trades
go into
often,
debt for,
yeah.
but also we need people in all different fields of study. And we need people to feel like I can get educated without worrying about, being in debt for the rest of my entire life. So I just want to thank you again for all the brilliant work that you have been doing and remind folks that they can get in contact with us at debtcollective.org or to sign up for an event specifically, go to debtcollective.org/events. And remember, you are not alone. Thank you all. Bye.
Ready.